Is nobody ready to be here today?
Hello.
Antonio.
Hi. Not here for fruit project. We are here just with Adrian for something else, but maybe we
Okay.
can talk about at the end of the meeting if you have a bit of time.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Hey, Adrian. Maybe we should do a quick roundtable on what everybody wants to be here for, since we are only 5 people. And then we can kind of set the agenda that way.
That
Okay.
if you want, I can start. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my name is Antonio. I work at CERN. What we do web hosting. Well, we do infrastructure for different services. We host Java applications, so web application developed at CERN, SSO infrastructure as well, everything on Kubernetes. And well, that's it, more or less. I've been working with Kubernetes since a while now, and that's it.
Thank you. Adrian?
I have easy way because I have the same story as Antonio, but less yours. And yeah.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Since we're only a few people, we're doing a quick roundtable on, why people are here and what we really want to be talking about.
Yeah, I'm Dylan Page. I'm a senior DevOps engineer at Lambda. Came into app delivery as a maintainer of the Atlantis project and kind of just been working in DevOps infrastructure, cloud infrastructure specifically for a while. I used to work at DigitalOcean and then at Autodesk and now at Lambda. So very much familiar with infrastructure, specifically application infrastructure, and working with the tag to possibly look at a new working group for that to try and help better define what that means. Yeah, looking forward to helping everyone figure things out.
Thanks, Dylan. Alan, only because you're next in my square.
Hello, I'm Alan. I'm a software engineer at IBM Research, and I'm here on behalf of a project called Iterate. So Iterate is a Kubernetes release optimizer, and I believe we will present in a future meeting. But today I'm just here to hang out.
Well, we're glad you're here. I know somebody reached out saying not this time, but I think next time maybe.
Yep.
Or an Iterate project review. Okay. Ryan.
Hi, my name's Ryan. I work at Microsoft doing open source, and I lead a project called Radius that is in the application description infrastructure provisioning space. And I'm here to hang out.
I mean, I'm glad you're here because as Dylan mentioned, we were talking about spinning up a working group on infrastructure lifecycle.
Okay.
So wondering if Radius would be a good candidate for that working group, because we also have the app development working group that is being spun up right now, the charter being written, we have the Slack channel, so we need to do all of that for the infrastructure lifecycle working group as well.
Okay, well, I would be interested in that. I'm also involved in the app development working group, by the way.
Nice.
Which is interesting. If anybody's interested in that topic, it's very, very early and we're still figuring out what that's kind of going to be about. So you have a chance to give input at something that's still forming.
And it's such a broad topic area, just like application delivery is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's the relationship between the infra working group and app delivery? Is it a working group within this tag, or is it going to be its own tag?
The way it works is right now, and I might have to go let my dog out because he's sounding desperate. Dylan, would you like to talk about this really fast while I do that?
Sure, not a problem. Basically, there's kind of been essentially a gray area we've noticed with it's very similar to the application development working group and the platform working group. There's a lot of overlap. There's also, the storage tag, the networking tag, and some of the discussions in the technical oversight committee was, okay, the issue of scoping in regards to these tags, and as the ecosystem continuously develops, and there was a proposal to merge the storage tag and the network tag into an infrastructure tag, but it was like a lukewarm response. And there seems to be kind of a growth of, especially with like things like the Crossplane project, and essentially OpenTofu applying for the CNCF as well. A need to kind of have infrastructure alongside somewhere as part of the delivery process, because when you spin up an application within a cloud native system, a lot of times you have some way of provisioning the infrastructure as a step in that process of delivery before you bring the application up, because a lot of times those are oh my God, I can't talk today. A requirement. A pre-requirement. Oh, there we go. So yeah, we're kind of and so I came into it because I'm a maintainer on the Atlantis project, and that was one of the things where it was like we initially were told kind of like that we didn't fit. But the problem is we didn't really have anywhere else to kind of go, essentially. Initially it was right on the heels of the HashiCorp and the OpenTofu stuff. So we were told, why don't you try and go with OpenTofu with the Linux Foundation? But quickly after that, OpenTofu applied for the CNCF. So some of the discussions around at KubeConU, where the Leanne and Thomas did kind of like a talk about the app delivery tag and did some quick polling surveys with the audience there. Infrastructure was essentially number 2 on all the topics. And the original plan was to try and have the platforms working group kind of take on the scope of infrastructure and infrastructure provisioning, but the scope of the platform working group is already, I think they realized it's a little bit too much. So it kind of like fell on the wayside and didn't get enough attention as it naturally deserves. So I think with this new working group, we're trying to kind of really kind of prioritize some of those projects that are specifically around the delivery of those infrastructure resources.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing the context.
Yeah, no problem.
I totally feel like I'm on the same page already.
Good. I'm glad.
And realistically, I don't think it would have been a great fit under platforms anyway. And for each of the working groups, we need to kind of do an audit of what the deliverables are, etc. Because it's not just everybody getting together, just, BS. But yeah, I'm fully on board with the infrastructure lifecycle one. So if you see other projects that you think would be a good fit as well, or a possibility other than Radius.
I know of some that are applied. I haven't seen them coming to meetings as much, but let me see who I can think of.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Because it'd be great to move these meetings away from just project presentations, which it seems like it has been lately.
That's what I heard at the last one. They had 4 people show up and want to present. Said we can't do that.
I mean, I understand, but yeah, it's tough when also we have a DTR working group, a domain technical review working group within the TOC, where we're going to try to, for all of you projects, make it more clear what we're looking for in these presentations, etc. How to prepare, and yeah, so you'll see more guidance coming out. I had a thought and I just lost it. Oh yeah. So another thing, updates for all of you, is that we are looking for new tech leads. Right now, Eloise stepped down as co-chair, and Leon was approved as a co-chair. So now I am the only tech lead, and it would be great to have, you know, if anybody's interested. Yeah, think about it. But
I feel like personally I would need to learn a little bit more to know if that's something I can do or not. I also just showed up here, so I have a little bit of imposter syndrome.
it's open source. I think everybody has imposter syndrome. Or maybe I should just say tech. Yeah. But then, so another good question is what would you all like to see out of the tag? So we do have the two working groups and 2 spinning up. But as far as the tag overall, what would help your projects? What would help not only your projects, but how you fit in with the greater cloud native ecosystem? So I wanted to kind of throw that out there for thoughts. Expectations. Brainstorming. I know Dylan always wants to say something, but he's holding back. See, I called it.
I don't have too many thoughts since I just started coming to these meetings. I think to me there's some value in like listening to some of the other conversations that are going on and like what problems other people are solving, what they're finding kind of hard to solve. And what I think especially the work around like what techniques are working well for users and adopters is really valuable. Um, that's some of the stuff that I've been able to kind of overhear in some of the meetings I've been to or read the guidance coming out of the group. So I would kind of +1 all that stuff as being really valuable.
Thank you for that. Oh, go ahead, Dylan.
No, I was just going to echo off of that. Yeah, what Ryan said. Usually, you know, best practices or practical experience is what people generally kind of look for. There's a lot of theoretical, I could use this, or this is how it could work. Or you go to a talk or you see someone else doing it, and it's you kind of get the theoretical of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But when you actually get into the practical parts of it, and what are some gotchas, things you don't normally think about when you initially design things of that nature. So I think that's a really good call out, Ryan.
I think it helps to understand where everybody's coming from too, in your background. I mean, how many of you are software engineers during the day? Like, or, yeah, right?
I'm a software engineer, but I graduated to not having enough time to write code anymore.
I'm a product manager, so I graduated too.
Yeah. And my background is like traditional dev tools like compilers and runtimes and stuff like that. So I've only really been in the cloud space now for like 2 or 3 years. So it all feels a little bit new to me.
I think it's important because you have the context coming in for more of the infrastructure side as well.
It's a good thing too, because it's a fresh perspective. Like
Right.
people like me who've been doing cloud infrastructure I've been doing it for 10 years. And you get a lot of times you just get a bias of how to do things, or you have a certain way of doing things and you get into a routine. So being new to the space isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing, especially for people who have been around for a while. I think people naturally come in and expect to like, oh, how do you do cloud infrastructure? Or how do you do app delivery? And you look for those best practices, but at the same time, what was a best practice 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, may not be the best practice now. And so what I always tell people is just ask questions. Question the narrative. It's not necessarily has to come from a place of it's just more of why, just asking a simple question of why are we doing it this way. I just want, you're just trying to understand, like, is this the best practice, or have we thought about this? Have we also thought about doing it this way? Or here's, you know we have, we've been doing containers for a while, and some people are used to VMs, and we all come from different backgrounds, so everyone has their kind of track of how they've done things. And that's why these groups are great, because you get a variety of perspectives, and sometimes all it takes is someone to ask a question for a light bulb to go off in your head, and, oh, why didn't I do it that way? That makes sense. So
And I guess I'm wondering, going back to your point, Ryan, about, you like to see the guidance and best practices, et cetera, that it comes out of at least this group. If we think back to both application development as well as infrastructure delivery or infrastructure lifecycle, we were going back and forth on what would be a good name for the working group. So for this group, what would be some guidance and best practices that you would like to see captured and shared?
Oh gosh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I think some of the things that I kind of have been thinking about, and I've got one foot in the app delivery group, and I've got one group in the app dev group. So take that. My perspective may not be 100% fit for app delivery, because they're kind of like the shadow of each other, right? Like I sort of think about, like, a little bit, app delivery is a working group about how operations and platform folks make developers successful, and app development is a little bit of a working group about how app devs work with platform and operations folks. And they kind of end up being like mirror images of each other. Like, what are practices over here that work really well? What are practices over here that work really well? So some of the things that I'm particularly interested in within the app delivery space are, like, how do we catalog and understand the infrastructure that's created? Like, how do we simplify those experiences for developers? And, like, what patterns work really well for that? I think a big topic that comes up a lot when I have conversations with Microsoft customers is, what responsibilities do devs have versus platform teams? And, like, what are some models for that, and what's right? Like, as an example, I was talking to a big telecoms customer that was saying, like, we don't ever want our devs writing pipelines. Like, it's just not a responsibility that they have. Because it's one of the things that we feel like they just waste their time doing it. They're not good at it, and it's expensive for them. So we're looking for ways to take any type of CI/CD pipeline just out of their hands as a task that they're not responsible for. It's centralized. Other places are like, we want all of our devs writing Docker files. Other places are like, no, we don't ever want our devs to write a Docker file. So if you're on the dev side, what should I own? And if I own this, how should I approach it? On the operator side, it's like, okay, I need to facilitate this for my developers. How do I do that exactly? What are some patterns that work? So I know that's vague. It's very high level, but those are some of the things that are in my head. And that's a great point, right? You have to define what kind of developer and what their skill set is. So there's probably not one answer to it.
There never is, right? If there were, we'd all be out of jobs. But that's great feedback. What about you, Adrian?
Sorry, using my keyboard is kind of tricky today. I had some background as software engineer, but to be honest, I came to this meeting to ask one simple question. Maybe could you guys advise me if I have a feeling like I spotted issue in Kubernetes that blocks my project. I'm using OpenAPI schemas directly from Kubernetes repository that they like to be updated from time to time, but they are not strict and they are not consistent comparing to the code base. Like code base is wider than OpenAPI rules. So my question is, where can I address this, or where can I ask for advice about this? Because I need to start.
So I would do that so if it's Kubernetes specific APIs that's blocking your
Yes.
work.
Yes,
I would
yes.
go to the SIG API machinery, Slack or call. I'll pull that up for you right now. And they're also, I mean, they're pretty active in the Slack channel for the Kate Slack, so I'll pull that up too.
Okay, and where is that Slack? It's part of CNCF or part of Kubernetes? Because I guess they have two different Slacks. Oh, great, thank you.
It's the Kubernetes Slack, and I'll go grab it right now too. But they're all great, and they'll give you straight answer.
Sorry to jump in this, but will not be this kind of a part of even this group, because I mean, you also operate on the application deployment, and this is actually, I mean, what does Adrian mentioned is an issue that we see operating cloud native application, because every time we need to go from a Kubernetes version to another, we have a main issue that the only way to know how to do this is just to deploy new cluster and deploy. And there is no static way to actually analyze our workloads. And so it's all empiric way because the API are not strict. I mean, do you think that this C group is something that could tackle, or I don't know, how do you see this?
So I would ask them, and I would love to hear what they say. And this is why I had been advocating for an API working group within the tag. So we'll see if the application development one kind of picks that up, or if we could instead, as a tag, work on a white paper guidance for APIs. But I mean, yeah. I'm with you. I think it would be helpful to have that at the tag level. And right now we need to see how we can work better with, the SIGs. So, but API machinery, like I said, those guys are great. If one of you does, or both of you ask those questions, we would very much like to know what you hear. And I think this is something that would be a great follow-on.
Thanks a lot for the feedback.
Yeah. This is an area that I'm somewhat passionate about, but there's only so much time, right? But if we do have like people that like yourselves are interested in going down that path, we can explore it. Yeah. And Ryan, sounds like something that would be up your alley too.
Potentially, yeah. I think we were also talking, we were talking about whether that fits within app delivery, and I don't think anybody over there thought that it didn't fit. It's kind of like if we attracted more projects that were focused on APIs and sort of client server RPC, like would that be big enough to be its own working group? Because there's a bunch of those actually. I come across them a lot. Like gRPC is probably one that everybody's heard of. But there's other projects spinning up all the time that kind of do like have their own take on what client server communication could look like. And I don't know that they really have a home, and maybe that home should be CNCF.
If you come across them, I mean, Sorry, go ahead.
No, finish, Karina. I apologize.
I was just gonna say, if you come across them, it'd be good to capture those. And then
Mhm.
if we find a bunch, go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, I guess my clarifying question would be, is this, specific to just kind of like Antonio, you asked specifically about, when doing upgrades and how to handle those upgrades with specifically your workloads. Is it like your own APIs that you're talking about, or just kind of general Kubernetes API
No,
deprecations?
it is a general. I mean, we
General.
upgrade from. I mean, we had some ingress resources that were,
Mhm.
I think, from 1.8 Kubernetes, and I knew that they were breaking. We were going from 121 to 125. I knew that they were going to break,
Yeah.
but there was no real tool that was telling me, look, before to do it, that this is going to break, because I knew that I read all the release note and things like that. But I was wondering if there is another way to do this instead of, I mean, empirically or going to check the release node all the time.
Yeah, I know there is a tool out there. I think it's called in my experience for that, I believe it is called, yep. So it's this one right here. I don't know if this is, I'm hoping I'm understanding you correctly. But this checks for APIs that are deprecated before. And you can run that as part of your pipeline. So that way you can get information about which resources are deprecated and then going to be removed. And I believe there's also support for, custom, but there it's a little bit difficult in terms of how to get those added in than just the defaults that are provided by Kubernetes.
But this is
check it
part
out.
of the issue. I mean, because
Yeah,
actually
it's-
we at the end we developed part of it as well. We
Yep.
as internal project, but this is part of issue. Is really sometimes that you can have a valid manifest, at least from the JSON schema, but then when you apply, the server of course complains. This is usually our issue. But I don't know. I'm just wondering if it was only our issue is something that could be tackled in the CNCF. But I think
there
I
could be
will
better.
follow your suggestion. Go to the machinery, and then if you are interested, we can follow up also with you and share with you the message from the machine delivery.
Got it. Yeah, they might have more context to be able to advise, but then I think this is something that could be beneficial for the tag to provide more guidance on in terms of best practices on how to make sure when you're doing that operational part with your applications that you're delivering them in a way that's not, you're going to upgrade and then you try to deliver them and the things are broken even though they're valid.
I mean, I think it's been a great discussion today. I'm kind of glad it wasn't a project meeting or presentation. Sorry to Alan who just left. Although congratulations, Ryan, on Radius being
Oh, thank you.
yeah, for Sandbox.
Now the real work begins.
Yeah, I don't watch the meeting in my comments. Actually, I recommended Radius too, but mine were that I'm trying to remember. So you did a good job with the application, and then for Radius, that you're supporting Terraform and then the Azure provider, but not like, a non-cloud native provider, since Terraform isn't really considered cloud native. So that was my hang up, is that
Oh, really?
supporting providers that aren't open source.
Yeah, they are being recorded, so I'll limit my remarks. They surprised us with that one.
Are we talking Terraform? That surprised
Yeah.
us, everybody?
Yeah, we're gonna we have, from a licensing point of view, now we have some like tricky work ahead of us to kind of figure out how to thread that needle, and we're gonna light up tofu as well. So that helps. I mean, it's a little bit, we're a little bit stuck from the point of view of like the technologies that we want to use for this, with the exception of probably Crossplane, are not really open source for the most part. That's the tricky part. So we're gonna light up Crossplane one of these days, and then we kind of have a needle to thread with Terraform. When we showed it to folks, we found that basically everybody has Terraform. Like basically everybody that is using Terraform. They might be looking at other things or starting to adopt other things, but everybody's got a lot of Terraform. So
I know, I hear there's this project called Atlantis that
oh, I'll have to check that out.
and Dylan's the maintainer, or one of them. So just
Awesome.
we're being recorded. No, I mean, there's so many companies and projects that are in the same boat.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, that's the thing, is that there's a lot of traction around this like infrastructure provisioning, like spin up an environment to run your code kind of thing. But for the most part, it's not open source, or it's kind of not on track to be a CNCF kind of open source. And so it's hard to know like what we should look at seriously.
Yeah.
I'll check out this.
But so, dummy question: is OpenTofu like as it is now, like a one-to-one migration from Terraform? Not really.
Yeah. So they purposely try to be at the MPL license fork, which I think is 1.5. They purposely try to keep the APIs themselves similarly, especially since they're still using the HCL2 language underneath. I mean, of course, a lot of the code that is now BSL is not in OpenTofu, or OpenTofu has developed similar features that are, done differently. But they try their best to be essentially a drop-in replacement for people who are migrating. Because they know if they don't, then people are not going to be willing to do the lift and shift work, other than just kind of swapping out a binary.
Yeah, we are in the same situation. We have Terraform, and we have to. Well, we probably try cluster API first, and then we'll see. But
Yeah.
I think we'd all be very interested in hearing how your cluster API experience goes.
I think this summer is the target for us. We will see. It's something that we had in the pipeline for a while, but we never had time. So now we're profiting of the license change to address it.
So Antonio and Adrian, have you been through the whole submitting a project to the CNCF process, and have you had to?
No,
No, because of this blocker. I mean, maybe the real example, if you define two fields for ingress, backend, service name, something like this, schema says two fields are required. So you have correct resource regarding to the schema. You try to deploy this, and you get the follow-up from Kube API server side that you missed third field. It means the schema is really inconsistent with the code base. There are a lot of if-else rules inside the code that not corresponding to the schema. That's why we stopped, because this tool cannot fully cover this migrating workloads from one version to another one. So, and we have feeling like this is the global issue. Like many projects were abandoned because of this, that trying to achieve the same result, and people just stop working on this because inconsistency in the schema. So yeah, I would like to ask for the advice, and also maybe to save future researchers time to mention this somewhere in the documentation, that schemas are, kind of fake, like, because people still update them, but they are never one-to-one with the rules in the code. So how to handle this?
I think your question was really if we went through the submit project. I mean, this was not really in our scope. The idea was really to try to figure out this issue, understand, because as Adrian said, we saw a lot of people trying, but no one really, I mean, there was no really input from the community. So at least we said, okay, let's try to continue to see, okay, we see that basically there is no way out, but at least we try to share this and try to raise this point. So maybe someone else will not do the same, because maybe we will save some time, because basically we saw other tools, we test them, and we saw that there was always something missing, but there was never like, okay, we abandoned this project because of that. So we would like to try to do something like that more than actually donate a project, because I think we don't have enough, and second, we don't have neither the enough person power to keep going and to have a lot of maintenance. That's the main issue. I mean, Adrian was the only person working for the last 1 year, and me, I'm kind of doing other stuff, checking with him, but I mean, this is more or less what we have. This is sometimes difficult to follow up.
No, it's good hearing both of your context. I think, and half of us work maybe for vendors and then other half work for end users, and we need the end user voice, because I mean, Ryan works for Microsoft, I work for Red Hat, and we come from a different point of view. I mean, we very much try to be, neutral in the community, but we do have our own experiences. So
Yeah, the vendor point of view is more about the ideal. The user point of view is what's real.
just get it done. Yeah. So your feedback's valuable, and insights. It helps the rest of us, the broader community.
So thanks a lot to you for listening us and to to listen to our kind of complaints. I mean, I really appreciate that you suggest us where to go, and also to listen to us. This is really great. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for bringing it up. And Adrian, if you have a link to your blocker, do you have it like upstream captured anywhere? It'd be interesting to look through that.
Yeah, I guess we have kind of a document that describe where to look and what hurts us. So I guess we can send it, right, Anton, at some point.
Yeah, that's, I think we.
But where can we share that?
If you want to share it in the Slack channel, the tag app delivery, or you can just share it privately. Okay. That's fine too. I mean,
no, Slack is fine, I guess. You can. Okay, so
us.
it's SIG API.
No, to the tag app delivery, I think you said.
If you share it with us, I mean,
Okay.
I do have colleagues that work in the API machinery. If you don't hear in the Slack,
okay,
directly, but really, being able to look through it, maybe, we'd have our own context and be able to say, hey, maybe this direction might be good too.
okay, yeah,
probably always interesting.
Okay, that sounds good. And could you also share an email so we can use both ways?
That's mine at least. Or you could also just put it into the document, the notes document. But see, there's too many. Okay. Since we're being open, there are too many ways to communicate in open source. So, all right. I'm not going to go on a rant, but that's my. All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Okay, because I feel like there's like multiple like white papers and stuff that actually could come out of just this conversation that we've had today. I think that one thing is with the infrastructure lifecycle working group, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, like Open Tofu, Terraform, you know, that we're all kind of concerned with as well. That would be a good area of guidance on, you know, if you're handling open source for these areas. So Dylan, can you take over again? Because my dog was after a squirrel last time, and this time he actually needs to go out. Never it back.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty good to kind of have, it seems to be, especially with this infrastructure life cycle working group, we're trying to evaluate and figure out what it means. It seems the discussions that we've had today and just in general are coalescing at a really good time right now. Bringing everything together at the right time, essentially.
One of the things that I'm kind of interested in, and I don't know if this makes sense or not, but like with the work that we're doing in Radius, it's kind of this idea that your app needs its dependencies, and those dependencies might be provisioned dynamically when it's deployed. And then like those dependencies might be fulfilled by a variety of different kind of infrastructure providers, which might be Terraform, might be something on Azure, might be Pulumi, might be Crossplane, might be Terraform. Right now, there's just 2 or 3 things, but there's going to be more in the future. And so one of the questions kind of on my mind is like, how do we define a kind of a standard interface to those tools, at least in concept? Because like we probably can't make them interoperable. Like that's probably not something we could actually do. But like in concept, what are the ingredients that need to go into invoking a tool like Terraform or calling, you know, an API like Pulumi? And like how should we think about that and expose that in a way that lets people plug anything in that they want, without kind of dropping to the like POSIX level of run a container. Like run a container will always be there as an escape hatch, but like, you know what I mean? Like if there were a standard way to kind of talk about the interfaces between these tools, it'd be a little bit easier for users to navigate rather than just like you have to write code every time you want to do this. I don't know if these thoughts make sense. That's
It
one of the
does.
advantages of all those folks getting together.
It does make sense because I think the big thing that we see, no matter the delivery method, whether it's reconciliation in Kubernetes with Crossplane or you're doing it manually with Terraform, infrastructure has state. And that's
Yeah.
at its core, it has state, and you're managing what state it's in, and you are managing the intended state versus what you have declared. And the difference between that is, of course, drift. And we deal with drift all the time, whether it's human invoked or it's invoked by the system itself because there was an update or the cloud provider or something failed. We have failure modes. And how do you recover from those failure modes? So trying to reconcile those dependencies, you really kind of have to if we're talking about the dependencies of an application in regards to what Radius is trying to do, it's probably good to have some concept of, okay, there is an infrastructure dependency, maybe there's a library dependency, what are all the things the application needs before it can successfully run? And like you said, some of those can be provided dynamically. Sometimes you have a chicken and egg problem and there has to be a manual process. What does that look like? I think the biggest thing for me, I'm biased, so I immediately assume, okay, you need infrastructure. Like I'm very experienced with that, but I'm curious to know what kind of other dependency classifications do you have other than infrastructure that an application might need? Because then you can really kind of narrow down on you know, infrastructure is a very well-known one, and it's kind of a broad term. You know, storage is, can be classified as infrastructure. The network could be classified as, you're in cloud. I like to, they're sometimes called primitives. You know, you have your compute, you have your storage, you have your network. You have, you could have, I mean, security groups or policies fall under network. I'm trying to just think off the top of my head here. What are some of those, having a better understanding of that before we kind of dive into what are the standard, how is it all standardized across? Because at the end of the day, like, I think we're all managing the same thing, where it's just doing different ways of it. Terraform is still managing state, but it has its own state mechanism that it stores either locally or remotely. And then Kubernetes has its own state mechanism where, it's either backed by etcd or, and that there's similar commonalities between, okay, Kubernetes reaches out, checks state, and if it drifts, it reconciles that state. Terraform does the same thing, but the mechanism itself is a bit different. So I'm kind of getting rambly a little bit, so I'll kind of leave my closing thought there. But I think figuring out the different classifications of dependencies might be nice, other than at least in your case for Radius.
Yeah. For our case, by the way, we don't have rules, but we have a principle, which is that it's whatever the developer thinks about as part of their application, and it's at their level of abstraction. So if they need a MySQL database, the level of abstraction for the developer is kind of set at, I need a MySQL database. It's not set at provision it on RDS and it needs to be in this VNet and it needs to be in this security group.
Or it's a stateful set through an operator in Kubernetes. Yeah.
That's the problem that we're trying to solve with code, basically, is matching the developer's mental model to the things that ultimately get created. Be they Kubernetes, be they things you're going to run on Kubernetes, things you're going to run in private cloud, or things you're going to run on AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever. We're also kind of using the same mechanism for. We haven't done much here, but we need to expand it. We haven't done much here around service-to-service communication and auth, because it's kind of the same class. It's kind of the same class of problem for, like, I need to know that I have the configuration to do auth with this other service. And it's kind of a common interface between, like, dependency on a database versus service discovery, service communication.
Like needing a central authentication service before you can talk to other services.
Yes. Yeah, and it all has to be customizable, right? Because, like, your auth service is not my auth service. So that's kind of how we think about it a little bit. I also find, by the way, on the need for common terminology and common descriptions, I find that the term infrastructure is pretty often used by people to mean the thing that I don't work on. Like the layer below the thing that I work on is usually, like, if somebody's saying infrastructure, it's like the thing that I take for granted. Unless you actually work on the infrastructure, you're probably not using it that way. So for some people, infrastructure means I need a VNet and a Kubernetes cluster. And for some people, infrastructure means I'm going to run Redis on Kubernetes. And for some people, it means I need a database. I don't really know where it is.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the as a service model that I think a lot of us are familiar with. Like it depending on what level you operate at, infrastructure means different things. Like if you're a software as a service, infrastructure is just, okay, it's like Netlify. You're deploying your app to an API endpoint and everything is taken care of for you. And then you got, platform as a service where it's a little bit more, not as you have to set up your pipeline and push your application somewhere to get tested and built, and then you can deploy it onto the platform. And you have infrastructure as a service. So it does mean different things. And I think I see another analogy I like to use is, or what I've kind of seen lately is, is DevOps dead? The rise of platform engineering, and it's, the difference between platform and DevOps is very similar, but still very different. So going back to, you know, what infrastructure means to people, you know, the perspective of having, I think, having a good answer to this is infrastructure, this is the platform, this, you know, what do those things mean? And trying to ascertain when someone comes in and says, okay, well, I need infrastructure, you know, yep.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to like-minded folks that share my confusion.
Like, yeah, like I put in chat, it depends on where you're working anyway, what your definition of a platform is.
Yep.
And it's a lot of marketing buzz. They needed a next new thing, and we've all been working on platforms for a very, very long time. We just go through different iterations. That's my opinion. But
Yeah,
but
I mean, just some candidly, like some feedback that we got when we started talking about Radius publicly, we talked about it a lot through the lens of platform engineering, and we actually got really strong reactions from some people that were part of our community that were like, I really like all of the things that you're doing, but they were a like system integrator consultant type firm, and they're like, but all of my customers are much too small to have a platform engineering team. And so like your messaging kind of scares people away that are like, we can't really do that. So we're backing away a little bit. We still, you know, not become cynical about the idea of platform engineering or anything like that, but realize that there were some people that didn't feel like they were along for the ride on that. We were too far into it with the marketing.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by it, but I was really glad to get the very direct feedback from some folks.
I love honesty. It just makes life so much easier.
Yeah. Dylan, how can I get involved with the infrastructure working group? Are there meetings I can join?
Not yet, but what I'm gonna start doing is
Okay.
me and Karina are working on that. We're gonna start drafting a charter. I've been reaching out to
Okay.
kind of groups that are interested.
Okay.
I think the next step right now is to, like Karina said, there's multiple ways to communicate in open source. So I think right now it's just been kind of there's a GitHub issue on the app delivery.
Yep.
And I've been doing some kind of like backdoor reaching out to people. I've reached out to the Crossplane folks. I've already talked to the Open Tofu folks. There's a lot of interest here. More than I can kind of keep track of at this point. So I think the next step is I'm going to possibly figure out how to create a Slack channel in the CNCF, and then figure out a good time to organize maybe some meetings where we can talk about, you know, what does a draft charter look like? I think we're kind of slowly getting there.
Okay.
But
Cool.
a good place to kind of centralize communications, I think, would be great. And on my task list too is kind of figuring out what's the best way to communicate. Here, this is when we meet. This is when we, outside of just the app delivery meetings.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Karina.
It was easy for me to find Dylan and Ryan at first, but Antonio and Adrian, if you're interested, you're the first one.
Right.
But really, we can just have a meeting and get going.
Yep.
It
I'll
doesn't-
figure out a time that's kind of separate from all the other working groups in the tag, and see and organize some meeting notes and get something going, and post it in the Slack and on the GitHub issues, and then hopefully we'll keep the momentum going.
Okay, we need to actually sit down and work on the charter. And I know Rion, he's got the latest on the working groups, and we just need to do it, have a working session and go through that. So
Sounds good.
All right.
I think
Cool.
that's,
Well, I'm gonna drop for my next meeting, but thanks. It's been nice to chat with y'all, and it was very nice to meet you, everybody that is here.
You as well.
Bye bye.
See y'all.
Take care.
Maybe if you have 5 minutes, okay. See you.
Oh,